distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to today's Nkatu Mibe. My name is Ndubisiane. My task here is very simple: to set the ball rolling. I'm going to talk about the Center for Memories, after which I'll call up the chairman of Enugu Sports Club, Chief Etiaba. Then after which we expect Chief Patrick Okibo to come out and introduce the guest speaker. Center for Memories is our collective responsibility. It's an idea that came up among a few people. The idea is that we should have somewhere where memories should actually be kept, awakened, and but more importantly, we are supposed to actually create an atmosphere where we look back at what has been, where we are, and perhaps we'll start thinking about where we're going. So the Center for Memories has an office at August Street, Independence Layout, and it has been in existence out of the gracious support of people. Some of you are here, and some of them are not here. But the whole idea is to have somewhere where it's something like a repository of things concerning Ndibo, Ife Bwasaline. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, without wasting much time, I will ask you to, as much as possible, try and see how much you can give your support. Visit the Center for Memories at August Street. Give financial support if you can. For example, just this week, Fidelity Bank commissioned a library which they built and they dedicated for the kids. Somewhere where children can go and study. So the most important thing about this CFM is that it belongs to all of us. It is nobody's property. It is all ours, because we all have a part to play to reawaken what we are. So at this juncture, I will request that I will ask Chief Ben Etiaba to join us and continue from where I stopped. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, is the first Friday of the month. An evening every month that is set aside for Nkata Omuibe. If I be okay, Nkata maka odimma ndibai odimma Omuibo odimma obodai bo Nigeria. So I'm so happy to see that this event has continued to attract a few serious-minded Nigerians who understand the reason, the very reason that we gather here every month. Welcome to the Cinema Hall of Enugu Sports Club. Welcome to Enugu Sports Club 1929. Welcome to the Center for Memories, organized with a little support from Enugu Sports Club event. This evening, we have a brother here to speak to us. I don't know if Dr. Keshi will speak in English or in Igbo, but I'm sure that in whatever language or dialect he chooses to use, that he will have some food for thought for us this evening. Just a few days ago, in this very hall, we hosted a drama presentation, August meeting. Once again, courtesy of the Center for Memories. Can we please put our hands together for the center? You see, what they are doing is very unusual, especially for our people. It's very difficult to see our people do things for the benefit of others altruistically without a profit motive. I appreciate them. Somebody who is better qualified to introduce the speaker will speak after me to bring him on stage. So, but I acknowledge in the audience 2 members of my executive committee who are so far here. Indeed, 3, as somebody is walking in now. The Membership Affairs Secretary, Mr. Tony Okume, who's coming in. Mr. Taiwo Eliku, ex-officio member, who is here. The Media Secretary of the club, Sir Emmet Mbelu, who is here, seated next to Chief Ojina. Ojina, your surname keeps your full name, sir, Engineer Ojina. I'm happy to have you here. Engineer, we seem to have quite a number of engineers here this evening. Chike Madweke is here. And I have to thank Chike, who is the chairman of Urban Radio, for his sponsorship too, because this event is relayed live for those who are not able to attend but able to tune in to Urban Radio. So Chike, we're grateful to you. Thank you, sir. Somebody I know who is not just always here, but who has been supporting not just this executive, but supporting the work of the center quietly, is here. He is the Honorable Commissioner for Chieftaincy Matters and Local Government, the Honorable Chijoke Edoga. You're welcome, sir. And we have Professor and Professor Mrs. Paul Okonkwo. You're welcome, sir and madam. I'm not going to welcome Patrick to his own show. You will get to hear from him. You've already heard from Chobi. And the hall will very shortly fill up, but we don't want to wait for everybody to be here before we start. What's important is that this event is holding tonight. The post-event management will happen. The center they'll usually do a good job. They will usually do a good job of that. So we'll leave the center to do that. Ours will be to provide this stage, provide this platform. It's a collaboration that I believe will stand the test of time. Once again, welcome and enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Afambo Patrick Okibo. I am one of the trustees for Center for Memories. In fact, just custodians. Maka trustees, equal trustees, or they call Kanye Sonwelo. What we are custodians of this idea. The idea that Nandi Bonidi Ebe Haganezuko. Ndi Igbo need a platform to collate our collective memories. Maka ọ na-aba anọkatazi ọ dịka anyị na-akụja akụja. In a country, anyị sokwa wee nwelu. Anyị wee sị ka anyị bido kpokọnataba onwe anyị ọnụ. And about a year ago, December 28th, last year, a number of us, after many years actually of hard work, finally got a place na number 2 August Street off Umoji in Independence Layout and set up a museum called Center for Memories. Obo ni ike ejero kabaro kije maka ezigbo ife na-eme ebe ahụ. And these individuals, who unfortunately are not here today, include Ndidi Okonkwo Nwuneli, Nkiru Okpaleke, Jude Ilo, Nkem Nweke, and myself, and our resident historian, Professor Rina Okonkwo. Biko, a round of applause for her. There are a number of initiatives we have under the Center for Memories. Nkata Umuibe happens to be one of them. But we also have Nkata Umuaka, maka ndị okenye kpasịa nke ha ụmụaka n'idikwa ịkpa nke ha. We have Nkata Umuaka that holds once every month. We have a book club, which is an opportunity for young people n'Enugu to get together and read classic books by Igbo authors, Chinua Achebe, Cyprian Ekwensi, Flora Nwapa, and so on. And you're in an environment where you discuss with other like-minded people. What do we hope to achieve with Nkata Umuibe? It's to create a space where we can have very important conversations. Very important conversations. And we've been lucky that since Ibidoya in May of this year, we've been able to attract a number of deep thinkers, like the distinguished speaker we have this evening. But just to refresh our minds, in May, we had Professor Chidi Odinkalo. In June, it was Professor Kane Dibe. In July, Dr. Oke Ikechukwu. August, Dike Chukwu Merije. In September, Chief John Onyanwodo. I missed the person for October, but in November, we had Yvonne Chioma Mbanefo. And this evening, we have the distinct honor of having Dr. Chuba Keshi. We are very excited to have Dr. Chuba Keshi as our distinguished speaker for December 2018. He's a political scientist, a journalist, a former banker, publisher, and management consultant. He started out as a business correspondent for one of the national newspapers and rose very quickly to the position of group business editor before venturing into banking, where he headed the research and planning department of a leading Nigerian bank. He left banking in 1996 to go into full-time consulting and publishing. Since then, he has consulted for many institutions on research and planning, marketing and corporate affairs. Some of his clients include the ministries, departments, and agencies of many states and the federal government, as well as foreign and local private sector companies, including the World Bank, the OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. He was also a senior resource person in the federal government's Vision 2020 work group and many other relevant planning committees at the state level. He's a published author on management and contemporary philosophy. One of his very well-received books is Politics of Last Resort. I hope he would make some references to the book. He's also the publisher of Pharmascope, Africa's first health business journal. It is no surprise that he got his first degree from the only university worthy of being called a university in Nigeria, which is University of Nigeria. ọbụrụ mụ aka ọsọ ya eseti jam bụfọ onye ọbụla ndị ma akwụkwọ jebe UNN ndị na-amara akwụkwọ jebe suit. But he got his bachelor's degree in political science from UNN, and from there he got his MBA at LASU, his MSc from University of Liverpool, and his DPhil and PhD from Monarch Business School, Switzerland, where he was also a professor in the business school. But today we're excited to have him here to talk to us on the topic, Kedu Ndị Igbo, an inquest into Igbo identity. I'm really excited about this lecture, and please join me with a round of applause as we welcome Dr. Chuba Keshi.
Good evening, everybody. I'm so excited to be here today. The reason I'm so excited is that the last time I came to Enugu was in 1996. Then I was in banking. I was about leaving the industry then as part of my rounding off efforts because I was controlling the branches in my bank. So as part of my rounding off efforts, I visited Enugu. That was the last time I came in here. And I really don't know why that happened. I can't explain it. But I can say, this is homecoming for me. Please welcome me home. I want to thank the organizers of this monthly event, the Center for Memories, Enugu Sports Club. And I am so excited when they said a library has been commissioned for the center. So I am going to donate 5 copies of my recent book, The Politics of Lasito, to the center. I have 2 copies here, but I'll drop them and subsequently make the other copies available. I want to thank the individuals who have facilitated this monthly in Qatar. I want to thank the chairman of this place, Chief Ben Etiaba. I've heard so much about him, but I was privileged to meet him today. Same for Patrick Kukibo, whom I've also heard so much about, and happy to meet today. And my good friend, who isn't here today, Nana Ude. I want to thank everybody, all the staff of this place who have assisted them. May God bless you all. I want to please recognize a young friend of mine whom I linked up and asked him to make sure he shows up today. He's a budding Igbo scholar that has impressed me. And being a young man, I had to speak his language, and I said, please, don't fall my hand. And I'm glad that Mazi Okorobonia did not fall my hand. He's here today. Mazi, please. You're welcome. I see in this young man another FC Obalo in the make. And I've encouraged him to keep doing what he's doing and to keep improving. And I know that the sky will just be the beginning for him. Kedu ndị anyị bụ? Who are we? This is a topic that has agitated my mind for so long. The issues involved in the Igbo personality, the Igbo persona. My first Igbo class was in primary 2. That was during the Civil War. You know, we had returned, once the war started, I was in primary 1 when the war started. My parents were somewhere in today's Edo State, and then we came back home. It was in class primary 2 that Igbo was introduced to me as a subject in school. On that faith, I will never forget, I was 6 years old because I started at 5. I was 6 years old. And that day, the teacher wrote Igbo on the board and began to talk. I wasn't concentrated. I wasn't listening because I didn't understand why he should teach me Igbo instead of Igbo. So when I got home, incidentally, my mother was also a teacher in that school. When I got home, I asked my mother, why was I being taught Igbo instead of Igbo? So she took time to explain to me that the right word is Igbo, and that Igbo is a corruption of the word Igbo. You see, but that is not the point. The point is that that was the indoctrination I was getting as a child. By the way, I come from Onicholona. Onicholona is a village about 20 miles from Asaba, in today's Delta State, in Aniocha North Local Government. The indoctrination I was getting as a little boy, I've been very inquisitive as a child, since I was a child, is that we are IBO, Igbo, and that those of us after the Niger, that's before the Niger now, if you're coming from here, are Igbo. And there was some kind of disapproval, mutual disapproval between Igbos and Igbos. Now, the word Igbo, which is a misnomer, there's nothing like Igbo. It could mean something else. IBO, which is a misnomer, is being exploited by two categories of persons. The first category, I just explained, my people, the people from the Midwest. And the second category are the generality of Igbos, those who feel that Igbo is, please let me use this word, funkier. And they say, okay, that is what is easy for every other person in the world. Umunnem, and you Igbo. Igbos are known not to be intimidated by anybody. It was Fela that went to Germany, and when he wanted to sing, he said, if you don't understand my language, I'm sorry, I can't help it. Igbos have never bothered why people should approve of them. So why must you want people to approve of you and you say you are Igbo? So the word Igbo sometimes, like I said, my people use it to refer to themselves. And it has created a chasm between us, Midwesterners, and Eastern Igbos. That's why once this program was announced on the social media, I began to receive calls and all kinds of texts from family and friends. But one that agitated my mind so much came from a young man. He is from Onicholona, my village, but he lives in the UK. And let me quote him. He said, I salute your courage and determination to swim in these shark-infested waters. That means the issue of Igbo, who are Igbos, the origin of Igbos, is a shark-infested water. Well, I am Jonah. I will swim in it, and I will defeat the shark. Is that also? Now, what exactly he meant by swimming in shark-infested waters is now makes me to situate this topic in this context. I am not going to discuss origin of Igbos, no. Either the anthropology of Igbos, the genealogy, or the history. I will leave that because if I do that, that means maybe I'm trying to create my own school of thought, or I want to align myself with one of the numerous schools of thought. No, I will leave that to historians, archaeologists, social genealogists, and anthropologists. What I will concern myself with are those existentialist objects that either qualify you or disqualify you to be Igbo. But in the process, I will highlight those the thesis of those schools of thought. So, if your native dialect, your native tongue, your language has ndo, no, and dia in it, does that qualify you to be an Igbo? We'll come to that later. So the ultimate objective is not for anyone to glory in his or her Igbo-ness. Please, I want to say something. So I'll be using his, her interchangeably, but most of the time I will use his. This is simple. His covers both, or he, a man, covers both men and women. Of course, we all know that women are an improved version of men. Because to be a woman, you first of all have to be a man. Then God will put a womb in you. So you're a womb man. So if I say she or woman, it does not cover the men. But if I say man, it covers everybody. Is that also? So, the question that will bother us will now be, how do I see myself as an Igbo? How do I see another Igbo man who is not from my stock in terms of my kindred, my clan, or my tribe? How do other Igbos see me? How do other non-Igbos see us, all of us? Then finally, how are we supposed to be seen? So we'll be dealing with those values we hold so dear that must give centrality to our actions in terms of our social relations, both with ourselves and with persons outside the Igbo extraction. Now, who is an Igbo? Apart from that person to whom Igbo is native tongue, what else makes an Igbo? Is the Igbo man just that individual with many firsts in technology, indigenous to Africa, but with global applicability? Is the Igbo man one that holds the African hope of reverse engineering, if it will ever come? Is the Igbo man just that African that refuses to be intimidated, no matter the odds against him? Is he just that African that is it that African that has refused to remain in ignorance and keep questioning to know what other people know or what other people quest to know? Is the Igbo man just that African who can survive anywhere in the world with the same dexterity and audacity as even the indigenes of those places? Is the Igbo man the African who has invested in other climes far more than other climes have invested in his own land? And in most cases, that person who has invested more in other climes than he has invested in his own land, is that the Igbo man? Is he that African who will not only sense an opportunity where it exists, but sometimes creates such opportunities, even from seemingly impossible situations and conditions? In short, is the Igbo man the ultimate manifestation, the ultimate African manifestation of that Napoleonic maxim, which says that impossibility is only to be found in the dictionary of fools? What I'm trying to say is that to an Igbo man, nothing is impossible. Is that the way you want to understand an Igbo man? While all the above attributes may seem true of the Igbo, there are many mannerisms that appear on the flip side. For now, let us just say that those things are a matter of conjecture. Yet, it will be self-deceiving to assume there are no points of discomfort, sometimes very painfully so, in the course of our social relations, among ourselves, and between us and any other or other ethnic groups. I will therefore anchor this discourse on the old Greek aphorism, which says that man, know thyself. This is because it is an axiom that it is what you make of yourself that is the pedestal people stand up on to judge you. So who is Igbo? I ask again. To borrow the words of a friend, to define the origins of Igbo is like beauty. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So what do we have here? Scholars, Igbo scholars, not Igbo language scholars. I'm talking about the scholars of Igbo genealogy and Igbo origins. Each person beholds the history of the Igbo from his own eye. As such, many schools of thought or paradigms of explanation have emerged. Let us briefly examine some of them. The first and the most contentious, the most popular, I would say, is the Nri paradigm. The Nri paradigm thrives on the saying among some of us Igbo, na Nri bụ isi Igbo. Okife ndị mmadụ na-ekwu. Ndị mmadụ onwe ndị na-asị na Nri bụ isi Igbo. It is founded on mythologies, including the fable of descent from heaven by the Nri man, by Nri himself, to found the Nri kingdom, dating as far back as the 9th century. Although the first dynasty was suggested to have been instituted in the 11th century, there are equally some cultural institutions that are attributed to the Nri. These include Ikpualo, you know, the cleansing ritual of Ikpualo, the Ichiozo title, the Iguaro, and the New Yam Festival. There are authorities that say that these things were bequeathed to all of us Igbo by Ndi Nri. Closely following that is the Oka paradigm. The Oka paradigm thrives on the belief by Oka people that they bequeathed to us the 4 market days, customary market days in Igbo land, namely Oye, which my people call Olie. Some people call it Orie, Afo, Nkwo, and Eke. Again, here, this is still being contended by scholars of Igbo origin. There's also the Ibuku paradigm. The Ibuku paradigm thrives on the colorful display of ancient fossils and artifacts that suggest that we have been here even before you people came. Then there is the Jewish connection. The Jewish connection is related to the Nri paradigm and also related to the Igala account. So the Igala account, let me take that one first. It says that Eri migrated from Igala to found towns, Aguleri, Umuleri, Aguleri, Okozo, and Obunike, and some other towns. Now, the Jewish connection derives from the fact that there are some similarities between our customs and those of the Jews, like the 8-day circumcision. What I hear is that apart from Igbo land, there's no other culture that insists on 8-day circumcision. There's also the biblical evidence in Genesis 46:16 that Eri was the grandson of Jacob. Eri was son of Gad, who was son of Jacob. And then I read some authorities that said the Inri symbolic stool, the symbol of authority of Inri kingdom, that stool was carved from a tree that is only found in Israel. But the first historical record of the Jewish ancestry of the Igbos was by Elauda Equiano, which I know most of you must have heard about. He was a freed British slave of Igbo extraction. He wrote, and I quote, "And here I cannot forbear suggesting what has long struck me very forcibly, namely the strong analogy in the manner of customs of my countrymen, the Igbos, and those of the Jews, which alone will induce me to think that one people had sprung from the other." No matter what school of thought one belongs to, it has been shown by some authorities that all these people they said founded Igbo land. When they came, they met Umodiana or Umodiane. People were living in these places who spoke Igbo language. So, to that extent, they cannot claim that they are founders of Igbo. And they were practicing Ichiozo, they were practicing Iwaji. That's what my people call the New Year Festival. Some call it Ikeji, some call it Iriji, we call it Iwaji. They were practicing these things when Eri emerged in the 9th century. One sad thing in this debate, which ordinarily would be for the purposes of anthropological records, have unfortunately been taken overboard, even to the point of undermining shared Igbo values. Clans and tribes have used such accounts that suit them to claim landlordship over their fellow Igbos of other settlements. For instance, the slogan, Adi Ama Ama, Ndi O, Gwalo Ndi O, you know what the two O's are, is being used to remind the Onitsha Ados and the Obosis of the controversy behind who owns the land. And there are other such things all over Igbo land. When you trace your genealogy to some kind of autochthony, you now believe that you own the land and that the other Igbo man is inferior to you. This unfortunate paradox has undermined the entire Igbo nation, sometimes threatening worthy causes that would otherwise have been seen, that would otherwise have seen the Igbo nation on a jet age pedestal. This resonated in suicidal proportions during the Civil War. This particular incident is very central to my discussion because it undermined the efforts of the war efforts of Biafra. When Midwest was overrun and Midwestern officers were conscripted and moved to the east, I want to admit that some officers, some Midwestern officers, did not approve of the war. And the reason they didn't approve of the war was that from their own professional judgment, mind you, most of these officers were either Sandals trained or they were trained in Aldershot. They didn't approve of the war strictly for professional reasons. Some of them refused to even go. A typical example was Henry Boba, Colonel Henry Boba. He was a Midwestern Igbo. He refused to come to Biafra. And when the Nigerians chased the Biafrans back, they did not even acknowledge the fact that he refused to fight for Biafra. They summarily executed him. Now, those that chose to fight came to Biafra. One of them who is about the only living first crop of the Nigerian army, Colonel Alfonso Keshi, happens to be my uncle. When they arrived at Enugu, he was there, Nwawo, who does not need any introduction, who is also my uncle. In fact, Nwawo is from my own kindred, and my father, my late father, was next to him among our kindred. Nwawo was there, Nzefili was there, Nwaje, Rudolph, Trimnell, all of them were there. So there was an argument as to how to proceed, what they needed, and all that. So there was an argument between my uncle and Colonel Chude Soke. And Chude told him and the rest of the Igbo officers that you people don't have a choice because you were conquered people. For God's sake, how will you tell a fellow Igbo man who has come to fight war with you because he comes from Midwest that they were conquered people? We must not lose sight of the fact that a good share of the Biafran gallantry and resistance is attributable to most of these Midwestern officers. Yet, we must understand that this kind of discrimination must have affected their war efforts and must have undermined the entire war effort. And this is why this discussion is holding today. We Igbos must understand that we are one and the same people. This kind of a thing brings us to what I consider the greatest trophy of this unhealthy present Igbo origins debate. This is the emergence of the word or the phrase, Core Igbo, or Igbo Bu Igbo. This, of course, expectedly, is the main objective of those who try to establish the origin of the Igbos. Now, this rather offending phrase must also create corresponding dysphemistic phrases such as non-core Igbo, not so-core Igbo, or Igbo na-abụghị Igbo, or even Igbo na-abụghị ezigbo Igbo, or even Igbo na-egheghị eghe, that is Igbo that is not well cooked. But then there's a serious difficulty in this line of thinking. For ease of discussion, let us first understand that all these paradigms about the origin of the Igbos are founded among Igbos of the East. Every paradigm, every model, every thesis, every theory about Igbo origins is founded here in the East. So let us, for the purpose of discussion, agree that this is the heartland of the Igbo nation. Is that not so? Now, what happens to those among us who have traced their origins from outside Igbo land and who are living in the East and with no basic difference in language and subculture from other Eastern communities who have been approved to be core? It is indeed interesting that that theory that says Inri came from Igala. Igala is not Igbo. So if we accept this theory, will Inri now be called Igbo? There's another account that says that Ohafia came from Owan in today's Edo State. On the other hand, perhaps these advocates of Igbo corners, Igbo Igbo, might say, okay, there are some of us who have been indoctrinated, whose culture has been indoctrinated by some other cultures. Now, the process of acculturation, which has, of course, affected my people, I have no doubts about that. There's a lot of beneath coloration in my own culture. The Bini governance structure is what we use in my place. We wear Bini beads for occasions. Just as the Igbos in rivers, they wear the tribe hat. That does not reduce or undermine your Igbo-ness. If you say it does, then we have no moral grounds to establish an Igbo identity, because the Igbo culture has been heavily acculturated by England. We wear English suits, we eat Oyibo food, we play football. All these are parts of our culture. So if this, even the governance structure we have, we borrowed from Athens. So the presidential system we borrowed from the United States. So we have no reason to even talk about identity. Well, the point I'm trying to make here is that there are colorations in some cultures does not diminish the essence of those people. We must understand that. I will come back to that later. Now, let us illustrate the difficulty I was talking about. There's an account, for instance, that traces the origin of Umuakbanshi community in Ela. Ela is in Delta State. Parts of Ogwashiuku, and as well as the people of Ibuzo. By the way, Ibuzo means Igbo Binuzo. In all of them in Delta State, to Adaibo. Adaibo was one of the two sons of Nri. The other one was Eri. His sons were Nri and Eri. Ezechima, sometimes referred to as a Bini prince, is the known progenitor of the Onitsha people, where I come from. The Isele people, the Obio people, and the Ezi kingdom, all of which are in Delta State except Onitsha-Ado, which is in Anambra. The phrase Ezechima is not Bini at all, or the word Ezechima is not Bini, it's an Igbo word. And there's an account that traces the origin of Ezechima to an Oka Olo Okigwe axis. This is just as Obompa. Obompa is another town in Delta State. Trace their ancestry to Ogidi in Anambra State. In the same token, the origins of the Ikwere in River State are associated with the Owerri, Ohaji, Ngwa, Echetiori. Today, also with the Bini migration theory. Equally, the Obi-Igbo debate, you know, Obi-Igbo and Oyibo debate in Rivers, is still very much alive as to the Igbo-ness of this part of River State. The same goes for the Ndonis of both Delta and River State. If the roots of these people are traceable to the Eastern Heartland, will the authors of Igbo disqualify them? The answer is obviously no. On the flip side, will communities said to have migrated from lands outside the contiguous Igbo enclaves be disqualified? The answer is still no. Perhaps in a bid to resolve this difficulty, there has been a resort to a standard official Igbo lexis, which has been made to stamp an Igbo identity, even since as far back as 1939. This gave birth to Igbo Izugbe, the standard Igbo vocabulary compiled by the Igbo Standardization Committee. But then we cannot lose sight of what I call Chinua Achebe's Akaweta Igbo Izugbe controversy. That is the controversy that Chinua Achebe's Igbo work, Akaweta, seems to create. My view is that what the Akaweta, because Chinua Achebe wrote that book in his Ogidi dialect, what he's trying to establish is that you cannot come and impose Igbo Izugbe on me. Igbo Izugbe, by the way, has 80% Owerri dialect, the Owerri collection of dialects. And don't forget the fact that there's still a controversy or a conflict between the Owerri group of dialects, if you like, and Onitsha group of dialects. If you remember, when the schools were run by the missionaries, the Onitsha sector, which was championed by the Catholic Church was kind of headquartered in Onitsha. So Catholic schools were using the Onitsha and Anambra dialect in their Igbo writings, while the Owerri axis, that was the Anglican Church, Anglican schools. So this conflict is resonating. In other words, with all this, what we must now do is to understand that language should be taken strictly for what it is. And that is as a vehicle of transferring culture, enculturation, either transferring culture to your own kinsmen or acculturation, transferring your culture to others. That is the role of language. The best in its character is not in the hierarchization of distinct groups, but in its role as an anchor for an ethnic group. In other words, we Igbos are not a tribe. We are an ethnic group. While tribes and clans may romanticize with the fables and legends of their origins, the important thing is that we must pause to recognize the word Igbo strictly for what it is. I've just said that. Now, the biggest tragedy of this, what I call social taxonomy, the tendency for people to try to hierarchize people based on what they consider their Igbo-ness, is the fact that it undermines what I consider the greatest maxim in Igbo literature or Igbo folklore, which is Egbe Belu Ugwemegini. It suffers so much in actual fact in the social relations among Igbo groupings by the attempt to hierarchize distinct tribes within the Igbo ethnic group. I am in this surprise that the adage that says that the sky is so big that 1 million birds can fly in it without bumping into each other is attributed to the Yorubas, because it captures the spiritistic content of the Igbo person. The Igbo man does not need to bring anyone down to succeed. You know this. The Igbo man does not need favors or rely on anyone for him to succeed. He does not rely on anyone for him to conquer his ecological environment and make a decent living. This is largely true of all Igbo groupings all over the world. Because of the considerable peripatetic nature of the Igbo, there is bound to be certain alterations in her culture. This is a universal thing. The Igbos are everywhere. They are in Delta State. They are in the United States. They are in Haiti. They are in Cameroon. They are in Anambra. Well, Anambra is bordered by Igbos in the Midwest and Igbos in Enugu and other places. But those of us in the Midwest, we are bordered by all kinds of people, Robos, Benis, and the rest of them. Now, but that does not diminish the essence of any culture. I'll give you examples. Pasta. Pasta was first eaten by Italians. But today, pasta and its derivatives, if you talk about pasta, spaghetti and all that, we talk about China. But they got it from Italy. The English suit and the English language first occurred in England. But today, the culture is everywhere. Now, has the fact that China has adopted the Italian food culture, has it diminished the pride of the Chinese? The answer is no. I have gone into this narrative to draw our attention to the point that although most, like I said before, some of our chiefs wear Bini beads and the rivers they wear tribe, it does not undermine our Igbo-ness. Today I speak pidgin with a Warri accent. It is not because I come from Delta State. No, it is because I grew up in Warri. If I had come from Mbise or Abakaliki and I grew up in Warri like I did, I would still speak pidgin the way I speak pidgin. But it does not diminish my person. I'll give you a typical example. There was a young man I schooled with in UNN. His name is Stanley Ama. Stanley Ama grew up in Warri with me. So when we were in UNN, he spoke pidgin like I did. In fact, 2 days ago, a friend of mine was arguing that he is from Delta State. I said, no, Stanley comes from the East. You see, but that did not diminish Stanley in any manner. And I want to tell you that Stanley went up to make a record first class in English language. And he was just 20. So the point I'm trying to make is that people are acculturated by other cultures does not diminish their personalities. So the fruitless and unnecessary comparative debates about the origins of the Igbo are at best diversionary. They are irrelevant and a waste of time. I'm not saying that it's a waste of time to dig into the origin of Igbos, but it is a waste of time to use it for some kind of social taxonomy among the Igbo groupings. It is very unfortunate because what is happening now is that it is beginning to undermine the very values of us, of we Igbos. It must be borne in mind that perhaps the greatest damage this crisis has done is that it tends to break and permeate the very fabrics of our morals and values. It is a paradox of sorts that even though the first African to challenge the vehicle of colonial domination or indoctrination, namely language and literature, in the person of Chinua Achebe, was an Igbo man. Yet, I will arguably say that among the major ethnic groups in Nigeria, the Igbos have shown the most trait of culture clash. When Yorubas are gathered, you don't hear them speak any other language. When Fulanis and Hausas are gathered, they don't speak any other language. The Yorubas pride in their culture. Why is it different with us? This brings me to yet another tragedy. This is the fact that one thing I consider another prominent maxim among the Igbos is being threatened. That is Igbo Ameze or Igbo Enweze. Igbo Ameze, for those of you who don't speak Igbo, is Igbos don't know any kings. Igbo Enweze means Igbos don't have kings. It is not that Igbos don't have kings. The metaphor of this particular expression, of course, the expression builds from the early Igbo organization, governance structures, which were Athenian democracy. But the real meaning is that though Igbos recognize kings and heroes, they don't make leviathans of them. They don't worship them. But unfortunately, and dangerously so among the youth, these days, some of our youths, not only recognize heroes, they have begun to worship them. Please, use your tongue to count your teeth. Now, it is part of this crisis of identity that some of us now are looking for a separate state, not a separate Igbo state. I'm not saying a separate Igbo state. But it is a fact, a part of trying to stamp the Igbo identity, to make the Igbo, to unbottle the Igbo, that they are looking for this. You see, but I tell you something. The Igbo enclave, the geographical entities that make up the Igbo enclave, even up to Cameroon, is not enough to contain only 10% of the industrial. I'm not talking about of the industrious. I'm not talking about industrial Igbo. The industrious Igbo, the hardworking Igbo, 10% of us, the Igbo land cannot contain us. We will have problems of surplus labor and whatever goes with it. Let alone the industrial Igbo. One industrial Igbo, one industrialist alone, you know what he can do. Who is Igbo? So what Igbos need is a societal stability based on justice, a reasonable, a responsible federalism, and good governance. All of this towards a level playing field and a huge marketplace. The Igbo must change the narrative from genealogical hierarchization of ourselves to understanding the dynamics and the actual content and character of a typical ethnic group, which is what we are. China provides a typical example. China is mainly peopled by the Hans. The Hans are almost 2 billion. And they have hundreds of thousands of tribes. Just like we do, we have a lot of tribes. My own tribe is Ezichima. Your own could be Wawa, it could be Bende, it could be Oka, Abakaliki, whatever it is. If the debate had been that of tribal superiority among the Hans, China will be nowhere. In America, the same thing. The Aborigines are not the champions of America today. So the narrative must change. We must focus on some kind of ideological consciousness. I have attempted to show that the word Igbo cannot be claimed by anybody. So you have your ethnic group, you have your tribe, you have your clan, whatever. All of us speak Igbo. Anybody in my place of Onicholona, we don't have any other dialect. Our dialect is Igbo. Any other language. Our language is Igbo. We have no other language. So anybody, any group of persons in any community, anywhere in the world, who has no other language than Igbo is Igbo. And no person, no group of persons is more Igbo than the other. Mba. If you put me on a level playing field, I will excel like an Igbo man. Yes, because that is what I am. Now, but again, in some places in Delta State, there are some communities, they speak Igbo, but they have another indigenous dialect. Those people, you can say they're not Igbos, that they came. Yes, you can understand. But once you have no other language, you are Igbo. So what are we saying? That the narrative must change to a focus on some kind of ideological consciousness. And that consciousness is what I call Igbocentrism. Igbocentrism must be differentiated from Igboistic ethnic politics. Let me differentiate them. Igbocentrism is not ethnic politics. Igbocentrism refers to the identification of values that we hold dear and to explore and exploit them for the betterment of humanity. Meanwhile, Igboistic ethnic politics is the politics of exclusion. You see the difference? The politics of exclusion, whereby you exclude people because they are not Igbo of whatever coloration. They are not Igbo, they are not Igbo, they are not called Igbo, and so on and so forth. That is Igbocentric ethnic politics. It must be discarded. While Igbocentrism must refer to the identification of every Igbo man wherever he occurs and recognizing him as one and the same person with every other Igbo man and with all their appurtenances so attached. May God help us. This is the only way the Igbo can unbottle themselves and take their rightful place as Africa's hope of jet age reverse engineering and lead Africa into the global committee of science-based civilization. I will end this discourse with the following audacious quote by Dr. Nwankwo Nwezigwe. Nwankwo Nwezigwe is a senior research fellow at the Institute of African Studies, University of Nigeria. I quote, "The history of the Igbo cannot be effectively and critically reconstructed by the art of vainglorious fabrication of non-existent facts, mutilation of the scanty available evidence, and politicization of the question of Igbo origins." Thank you very much for your attention.
Please, another round of applause for Dr. Keshi. Now I get a better sense for why the friend said that you were about to swim in shark-infested waters. Because what you've done is pull an issue that has been lurking in the shadows and you've pulled it into the marketplace and you're forcing a conversation around it. So it's interesting that that you chose to define Igbo based on language. But towards the end of your presentation, you mentioned that if a people have as their only language the Igbo language, then they are Igbo. But if they have a second language, then maybe they are not Igbo. I see that as even almost guilty of the first crime of separating Igbo from Igbo Neyereye. That even in that assertion, we are also drawing another line. I wonder if you can shed more light on that.
If I was born a Nigerian, of course, I was born a Nigerian, and I decide to become a Ghanaian citizen, I will apply and I will change my citizenship, although now you can have dual. In fact, this is even a perfect example. So I now apply to become a Ghanaian. Yes, I'm a Ghanaian, and I become a Ghanaian. But that does not mean I'm not a Nigerian. So these people I'm talking about, they speak another language. There's a language they speak that's like Yoruba. That means they are not indigenous Igbos, but they can be adopted to become Igbos. They can, with all the privileges. Are you following? But that does not mean that their roots, came from Igbo land. So, like I said, it must be differentiated from the politics of exclusion.
Now, you also, at the earlier part of your presentation, talked about the various paradigms of Igbo origin. And you laid out at least 5 of those paradigms, Nrioka, Egala, and so on and so forth. In fact, it's interesting that you mentioned Egala because there are many of us who do not even know the origins of Ndi Igbo that is traced to Egala, or that you cannot enthrone an Obi of Onisha without the Igalas being present, and so on and so forth. But my question is, if we do not have a shared or commonly accepted theory of origin, we cannot claim that someone is fundamentally Igbo, or that he's adopted, or by association. And if we then look at our place within Nigeria, where we actually need more friends and allies, so we should be looking to bring in more people than in drawing those lines. Would you still hold strong to the position that if Igbo is one of the languages spoken, then you are not quite Igbo? My question is, shouldn't we be looking to embrace more people? So if you barely understand the language, we should actually claim that you're one of us.
You speak the language. Sorry, I don't understand your question.
My question is, if there was one commonly accepted theory of origin for ndị Igbo, let's assume na anyị ncha niile kwekọrịta nọ nrika onye ọbụla si. Yeah? Then if we find some people who cannot trace their origin to Nri, we can say that they are not Igbo. But because there is no shared understanding of what makes one Igbo or not, if onye ọbụla na-asụ Igbo, we should claim that he's one of us, instead of saying, let's draw another line that says they might not be quite Igbo.
Yeah, thank you very much. You see, for me, the issue is not the origin of the Igbos. I don't think that is what we should be talking about. You can explore, but you will shoot yourself in the foot when you come to understand that the Inri theory, the Inris, when Inri came, he met people on ground. Are you following? And when he came, he met people on ground, and he came with Igala people. Today, both those Igala people and the people, the Umodiana, are all the same people. They are all Umuleri, Aguleri, and whatever. You know, Igbos everywhere. So, like I said, if you accept the theory that they met Umodiana, who were speaking Igbo when they came, so how do you trace the history of the Igbos? For example, my progenitor, Ezechima, of all the contributions I have read, the strongest one is that he came from Olu. Now, Ezechima's ancestors might have been one of the people that were in Olu when Henry came from Egala or from Israel. So, that means we don't have the same ancestry. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the focus should be on the genealogy of tribes, not of the Igbo ethnic group. If you want to talk about Igbo, you should talk about the origin of the language itself. That is different from the people. You must draw the line. The language of Igbo is the vehicle of enculturation, the vehicle of social relations among Igbos. It does not necessarily mean that there is one man that progenited the whole of the Igbo race. The only thing close to that is the Yoruba Oduduwa theory. It's only Yoruba ethnic group. If you believe the Oduduwa theory, then they came from one man. But like I said, even if we all accept the Inri paradigm, the Inri people met people on ground. And some of us sitting here may not have come from Egala. So we don't have the same ancestry. Like I told you now, my own tribe is Ezechima. That is my progenitor. Okay? Those of us from Onitsha, Onichubo, Onitsha Ado, Onitsha Olona, Onitsha Oko, and so forth and so on. And so on and so forth. We have our tribe and our ancestry. So you cannot, anybody that speaks Igbo only as a dialect, you know that he belongs to that original, either he came from Igala, if you accept the Igala paradigm, the Inri paradigm, he came from that place, or he was one of those people who were speaking Igbo before the founders came. So all of us are Igbo.
My last question before we open it up for the audience is, so we are where we are, that politics has mixed with language. and mixed with identity. And I am sure before the night is over, we are going to get a question on how come we are not speaking Igbo here. Yeah? I'm sure of that. Okay. I'm preempting it so you don't ask it. But really, the question is, if we chose to speak the Igbo language at all of these events, right? Because of the duplicity or the multiplicity of dialects, it becomes difficult to pick which dialect to use. And one then runs the risk of getting caught in the age-old fight of is it Igbo Izugbe or not? Yeah? Because if you go from Afikpo to Abakaliki to Mbise down to, it seems like different languages. So, to form that whole, that unit, should we be advocating for a common use of Igbo Izugbe, seeing that it's also enwrapped in some politics? Or how do you see what's the route to get around this, knowing that the fundamental goal is to create a more united whole?
Yeah. You see, for me, that is why history is very good. For me, I have no quarrel with Igbo Izugbe, but I just gave you an example of what Chinua Achebe's work symbolizes. For such a respected scholar, an intellectual, and philosopher like Achebe to have fired the first salvo, it shows you, like I said before, the Igbos they are indomitable people. If you make an Igbo man feel that you are dominating him, he will revolt against you. Let me go back a little bit to tell you the kind of people that we are. In the September edition, Dr. Nyanwodu reminded us of the Dunbar Creek revolt, where Igbo captives committed mass suicide instead of being enslaved. There was something he didn't tell us, which I want to tell us now. Do you know that slave trade all over the world, transatlantic slave trade, was brought down by Igbos? How did they do it? It was in Haiti in 1791. There was a revolt by, Haitian slaves who were majorly Igbos. By 1993, from that 91 to 93, they had dismantled slavery in Haiti and slavery was abolished. By 1804, Haiti had their first president. His name was Henry Christophe. He was an Igbo man. Okay? It took another 100 years. It was the Haiti example that every other person copied before slave trade fell. That's not all. The Ekumeku resistance that lasted between 1883 and 1914 was the strongest armed resistance the British Empire ever saw. It was prosecuted by Igbos. Well, Igbos of my place, Middle-Eastern Igbos. That Ekumeku resistance was what inspired the Mau Mau resistance in Kenya, which is on record to be the bloodiest resistance the British Empire ever saw. What am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is this. Give the Igbo man the impression that you want to dominate him, and he will rebel against you. He will resist it. History is replete with examples. This is why I feel it is not very good to make Igbo Izugbe 80% over a group of dialects. Anambra people and my people will resist it. Sorry, I'm not saying we will. We might. For me, I don't mind it. I can write it. If you like, challenge me. When we get up, I can write a letter in the way. I can write it. Because I went to school and acquired English language. And I can write with it. So why can't I write with Igbo? But I am talking about the Igbo person. So that is what Chinua Achebe flagged off in that his book.
Thank you very much. Let's take a few thoughts, comments. There's a hand in Here, Honorable Commissioner.
I'd like to find out from you, for instance, what you think should be the attitude of the Igbo people or the relationship of the Igbo people between us and our brothers across the river where you come from. I say it because, let me start from when I was in school at UNN. By the way, the Kingsley, Stanley that you mentioned is also my friend, Stanley Amma. I'm still in touch with him. He was in English, the same class with myself.
Where is he from?
Amma, it should be Imo. I don't know exactly, but he lives in London now. Okay, so I had a roommate from Delta Igbo area. He was quite not hostile. He was quite hostile to the idea of being identified with Igbo people. He didn't like it at all. He was very hostile to it. That was in the early 80s. So when I came out of school, I worked briefly with the Daily Star. I met some people from Delta Igbo also, who are quite fond of this place. And of course, we worked together. Much later, I encountered Iko Konta, Odozi, Ndokai Rabo. Ike is in Abuja now, but he writes for some foreign papers. So Iko Konta is a patriot. He identifies fully with what we are doing this way. Ndokai Rabo, he doesn't even want to be seen as Igbo. He doesn't like it at all. Obaibana is also Igbo, but they look towards Lagos. When we were in the House of Reps, Chidubom Wuche became the deputy speaker, mainly because the Igbo caucus preferred him. And he was quick to tell us, Abonyi Igbo. Then Austin Opara, who succeeded him, didn't want to be Igbo at all, in spite of his name is Austin Opara. So and I've also discussed with a lot of people from your area, and I asked them, they mentioned the Civil War experiences, and they had the bitter experience they had because of their relationship with us. And I asked them, what do we do from this side to make you forgive and forget? Because I believe that with the Kwere people, with the people from your area, we're all one. And I don't see why a few of them maybe look towards Lagos instead of looking towards here. I have a pet theory, but I'd rather hear from you what you think we can do to have our brothers there really embrace us, really all see us as one. Instead of this divergence, like Ndoka Yoruba not being Igbo, but mainly he's Igbo. Ndoka is an Igbo name. Ndoka Bible are not even identifying with us at all. So what is the reason for this ambivalence? Why do you have Iko Kontas, and maybe yourself, and maybe Odozi, maybe Hannibal, who are even more Igbo than the Igbos of this way? And you have those who are hedging. That's one. Two, when you read the Bible from maybe Exodus, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, you have a certain sense that these are our people. The relationship, the resemblance between our culture and the culture of the Jews, there's no doubt. When you record the circumcision, the issue of firstborn, the issue of harvest, the issue of thanksgiving, the similarities are enormous. The one that really gripped me is the one that I thought was peculiar to my own village. We have a culture of these mango trees. This is not mango, but this is a bush mango. We have a culture in our place that you let it drop. But the one that drops early in the morning, like 5 a.m., 6 a.m., you cannot touch them. They belong to the owner of the tree. But so he comes to harvest his own, he comes to pick. We don't bring them down we don't force them down. They just drop naturally and normally. So the culture in my people, in the Hamufu, is that you don't go to take those ones. If you go by 5 a.m. or 4 a.m., you're a thief. So you allow the owners of those trees to go and pick their own. Around 6 o'clock, 7, you are free to now go and glean the leftovers. When I saw this thing actually in Deuteronomy, I was surprised. It's a practice that the Jews also have. and they're enjoining you to leave that one for the poor. So I wonder whether it is because they recorded it that we see these things. Maybe others, are there no other civilizations that have all these things? And is there any reason why we should ascribe this Jewishness? That should we really underplay it or not downplay it or overplay it? Is there any significance? Is there any reason why we should identify with them? Then Obibo and Oyibo. I think Obibo is a history I have. Oyibo is a recent thing. It came with the creation of states, either the one Gowon did. Before then, Obibo was in Abia area. But they used a river. There was a river, they wanted to use rivers as a demarcation between River State and the Igbo heartland. And that river cut off Obibo. So before it was Obibo, when it was in this part of the world. But with the creation of states, either Murtala Muhammad's own or Gowon's own, there's a panel, they said, for boundary delineation. And these boundary people put Obibo in River State because of the river. So those who have always lived there, they know it's Obibo. But the Rivers people who want to reduce the Igbo-ness, make that one Oyibo. That one I'm fairly sure about. So, thank you.
My name is James Nnaj. The aspect of the lecture I want to respond to is tracing the origin of the Igbos to Igala Kingdom. The story we have in our village, I'm from Umaero in Isuzo local government, Enugu State, is that there was a time when the Ata of Igala, that's the king of kingdom, tried to establish empire or kingdoms in neighboring communities. This has been recorded. So it didn't succeed in so many areas, but the influence spread around communities around. In Nsukka, in some part of Uzuwan and Anambra, and down to where we live in Isuzo. That even the man from Ehalomona in Nsukka local government, they have a way they attach their name to Ehalomona Ataigala. So it was not, that's the traditional history I'm giving. That is not because the Igbos came from Igala, but because there was a time the Ata of Igala was so powerful, he was an emperor, that he had influence around the communities that lived very close to that part of Igbo land. So that's the story we know in our place.
Sure. Yeah.
Then the second one is the issue of identifying the Igbo, who is an Igbo man, Kedunda Igbo, based on language alone. I don't think we will be able to get the substance of the Igbo persona when you base it only on language. Because we know very well today, our children can acquire many languages. Some can speak Spanish very well, Chinese, French, English that we're speaking now. That doesn't make us English people. I'm not an Englishman. I read English in the university, but I'm an Igbo man. So we are yet to say Kedunda Igbo, or that substance that you know that is an Igbo man. And I would have liked to see from the lecturer or the speaker that two sentences of Things Fall Apart, the opening sentences, where Achebe tried to describe the nature of Okonkwo. That Okonkwo was a man who was known in the 9 villages of Umuofia. And his fame rested on solid personal achievement. So many people have described the Igbo persona on that sentence made by Chinua Achebe. That Igbo man can come from nowhere, from a poor family, from no background, from no royal family. But because he had that persona of the Igbo character, he can become anybody, he can be anywhere on solid personal achievement. So I think we are yet to draw that substance of Kedunda Igbo.
Pushing your argument a little further, if it is on Chinua Achebe's definition of personal achievement, does it mean that everywhere we find someone who has built a life on personal achievement, that they are Igbo. Yeah, so maybe it's something we interrogate further.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, the first contribution talked about the relationship between the Eastern Heartland and those of us in the periphery, if you like. And he answered the question partly when he talked about Chibudum Nwuche. You talked about somebody who was your classmate, who is about your age mate. You said in the early 80s. That was the same time I was in UNN. I entered UNN in 1980. Now, that means that person probably was born during the war or was already there during the Civil War. Like I said, the experience our people had, you remember the Asaba massacre? People were shot. Thousands of people were shot before children. And then it now became, in quotes, a curse to be tagged Igbo. So it was in response to that politics that many people began to avoid being associated as Igbos. Maybe that was how I got to understand that we were Igbo. That was why I was being told as a child. I was 5 years old when that massacre took place. So we were being told that we were Igbos. So many of us grew up with that mentality. Do you understand? I had this friend. He was from Okozo. He's dead now. He used to tease me. He also did not accept that we were Igbos. He used to say, we are Shua people. Shua. When he said that, I would just smile. But there was one guy from Iseluku. Iseluku is just close to Onicholona. He was always tackling him. He would say, Ndi Igbo Abunamba. But you see, I would just laugh and look at them. So what we must do is to keep educating our people. And that brings me to what, okay.
Sorry, before you move to the next question. If the core issue is that our Igbo brothers on the West suffered certain losses as a result of the war, and that is why our brothers in the West see the rift. What of the Igbos in the East who suffered 30 months of a civil war that was triggered by our brother from the West?
Yes. Exactly. And that massacre, the massacre was because they were told this was Nzogu's place. You see? But this flip side, like I just said, is politics. Politics is not always what is right. Politics is always what is expedient. So, like I said, but the invading Nigerian soldiers, what they knew was Igbo. Because the Igbo man had declared war. So Nzogu was an Igbo man, everybody was Igbo. So it was safer for our people to say, we are not Igbo, if only to keep them alive. The unfortunate thing is that those of us children who didn't know what was going on, that was what we were hearing. If I didn't have the kind of inquisitive mind that I have, I will tell you today that I am not Igbo. There are many people from my place who talk that way. You see, so that's why I said you have to keep educating. Like I said, the issue is not whether it was correct. Yes, this place suffered. We didn't have Kwashiorkor in my place, but it was in so many places here. It was very unfortunate. But for us to stay alive, for our people to stay alive, they had to. I remember when Biafra surrendered, there was a young man, my neighbor, my family's neighbor, our neighbors were the Ngonadis. Ngonadis were from Newi. Harry Ngonadi, the retired admiral, Navy admiral. He was a little boy with us then. The day the Biafra surrendered, a cousin of mine who was visiting from my mother's place started teasing him to the point that they fought. You know? And even as a child, I still disapproved of what the guy was doing because I understood. Like I said in primary 2, when the war ended, was 1970, I was in primary 3 then. You know, I was in primary 4. You know, I was entering primary 4 during 1970. It was in class primary 2 that my mother explained to me, like I said when I started, that we were Igbos and this was what was happening. Igbo is an indoctrination and all that. So when the boys were fighting, I knew that that was wrong and that the guy who was teasing Harry was wrong. All of us were living in the same compound there in Midwest, but he was from Newi. You know, so the other young man was saying that language alone shouldn't be. What else should? Listen, I said that Igbos, unless you are telling me that I am wrong, when I say that Igbos are an ethnic group, the most powerful indicator, index that defines an ethnic group is what? Language. And you were talking about speaking Spanish and all that. If you got me right, I said if Igbo is your native language, you can acquire Spanish, you can acquire English, you can acquire French. But what is your native language? If it is Igbo alone, then you are either an aboriginal Igbo or you are a migrant. And all of us, both the aborigines and the migrants, I don't know where I belong because I have not done a study on that. I have not researched on who begat and begat, as they write in the Bible. I have not done that. So if I do that, I will know whether Ezechima followed them from Igala or he was an aborigine. You know, so language is the main indicator, the main index that defines an ethnic group. The other one is culture. But you know, culture can be corrupted by what you call acculturation. But then the basic culture is there. Like I said, all of us in Igbo, we do New Yam Festival. Is there any woman here whose people don't do New Yam Festival? All of us do Ichiozo. All of us do Ikwalo. All of us recognize Oye, Afonko, and Eke. Not so. These are elements of culture that define the ethnic group. But in the absence of this, language alone is the main indicator. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Chikezie Ifedobi. I'm a documentary filmmaker. My question is straightforward. I understand that you're an authority in what you speak about. Just last week I was discussing with someone and he was talking about the River Niger being creating some kind of gulf between the former Midwestern states and the parts we know as the core Igbo states. I would like to know your thoughts on this. Apart from the fact that the civil war crisis that happened in Delta State, talking about the Asaba crisis, although it's exacerbated in a way the notion a lot of people have in that area of not being Igbos. But does that river, in a way, I just want to understand from you because this man was really speaking, the person I was talking to was speaking so passionately about it. He said that the river that cuts across it kind of separates the two.
Sure.
Apart from the fact that, you know, the Civil War also contributed from that.
Thank-
Just like to know your thoughts on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Concerning what the person has been saying is wonderfully good. But I think we have one major issue about this Igbo thing. I mean, the foundation of who we are. The problem lies on our supposed forefathers. Now, how certain are we that some certain things we are told about who we are absolutely true? The reason why I'm saying all these things is, for example, a Greek will tell you that this is who we are because it is written down by some certain people. Our forefathers never wrote down any. Sorry, hello? Okay. Most times these things are father telling son story without writing it down. How certain is those stories? A man will come and tell you. Hello?
Yeah. So the question is really, how do we know that the
How
paradigm?
do we know?
Thank you.
That's the foundation of everything we've been told about us is absolutely true.
Thank you. Thank
About
you
who
very
we are.
Thank you very much.
Thank
The
you,
gentleman in yellow.
My name is Ago Sitadima, a member of Alibo Development Foundation. I want to thank the Center of Memories for what they are doing, and we are very passionate about it. In support of what we have said, we did a study on the issue of the Civil War, and we actually did a documentary on Colonel Achuzie when he died. And we are at the 50th anniversary of the Asaba massacre. And the accusation about the divide between the Igbo across the Niger and the one in the hinterland was that the Igbos abandoned them and cut the bridge when the Civil War was on and led them to die. But Achuzie actually addressed that by saying to them that he was the one who cut the Niger bridge to save the people from actually being massacred again by the Nigerian forces. And by the time we went back in 2018 to bury him, more people were claiming to be more Igbo than we met before. And that's a major improvement. Like you said, there has to be constant engagement and education. Secondly, on the assertion of where we're coming from, I have a friend from Igala who was actually part of the coronation of the serving Ata of Igala. They call him Ejubejuelu. And they were saying that they could not coronate the Ata until people from Onitsha came. So we need to be able to ascertain the facts, whether it was the Igala people that were Igbos or the Igbos that were from Igala. Because he was saying that they are more related to Igbos than Igala. They couldn't coronate from Onitsha and Aguleri. These are the two places he mentioned. Then the other thing I want to say is that we need to continue to do more work. If we read The Stolen Legacy by Professor J.M. James, you see that the Greek philosophy people claim we are Greek, we actually learned from Africans. And studies have also shown that there was iron smelting before the coming of Christ in Nsukka. That means our history dates back before the coming of Christ.
Sure.
When I did the study on Ibuku, at 9th century AD, Ibuku had trade link with Egypt. So I think the Igbo scholars and the university also have to do more work so that we're certain where we're coming from. Because if you don't know where you're coming from, you don't know where you're going.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chike Nwankwo from the University of Nigeria. Mine is trying to get a clarification, actually. You mentioned Aboriginal Igbos and migrant Igbos. So I was wondering whether the migrants had actually met the Aborigines as, the ones with the Igbo language, the original Igbo language, actually. So that's what I want to get.
Very much.
Thank you, Doctor. This topic a topic that can take one whole day because it touches everything about Igbo and then Igbo-ness. You tried as much as possible to identify the geographical aspect of Igbo. But while you were doing that, you mentioned Igbo Amaeze and Igbo Enweze.
those two are still conflicting, in as much as they both apply somehow. You did not particularly explain it as to how it is, how it makes the Igbo man who he is. And then again, why it had made the Igbo man, or why it had placed the Igbo man where he is now in the Nigerian hierarchy or in the Nigerian scheme of things. It would be nice if you address that issue.
Excellent, thank you.
Please, I would like to know whether you think about the importance of unifying the language itself, whether it's from the Aborigines or the migrants, because I believe this will enhance the unification of everything.
Sure.
Dr. Keshu, thank you for the lecture. I just want to say something because some weeks back I had to point out this issue at the Ake Festival. You mentioned so much about the discrimination among the Igbos. And I found it hard finding an English word to describe the Igbo way of life, in the sense that from the family to the clan, to the village and to the town, there's an accepted norm where you can come to a family and say, Nonya amachara akwụkwọ, na nke a mara ife. I come from Udi. Even growing up, when we were one Anambra State, I had people from Anambra call me a Wawa man. They didn't mean, like, they didn't mean harm. It's just, it's not arrogance. We are not arrogant people. But we have this, within the finesse of competition and appreciation of life, we find a way where we encourage people or we put people at their places. So when it's misunderstood, like as if to say, the truth is that what people tell you does not define what you are.
Good evening. My name is Taiwo Ili. My brother knows that when we move from the east to Midwest, former Midwest, Delta, they call us Mwonyi Igbo. You know that when we move over, according to Niger, they say Mwonyi Igbo. It's still existing till today. When I moved today to Asaba, they say Mwonyi Igbo. Then you said that Igbo is one ethnic group, not tribe. And most of the towns that come from Delta originate from the east. Most of them from the other side. Then the map of the Igbo speaking area comes from Abo down to here. Mbanke, which is near to your town, don't speak Igbo. If they don't want to know what they are talking about, they don't speak Igbo. Abo, near your town, they have different language. Umunede, the same thing. When, after the war, we have one board that they call Igbo Ghana. You should be aware of that one. Igbo Ghana. So, if you are filling a form, say ethnic group, say Ika Igbo. Up to today, we don't believe that we belong to this side of the ethnic group.
Sure.
So what are we to do to make sure that we integrate the Delta side to Igbo? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
There are so many questions here. I will just go as fast as I can. Now, the first person talked about the river as natural demarcation. The river can be a natural demarcation when you are doing creation of states or creation of local governments. But it cannot be a natural demarcation for an ethnic group, Mba, or when any kind of river, Kwesi, he made that kind of demarcation. An ethnic group is an ethnic group. If you are doing I do not, I'm not very conversant with the constant geography of Nigeria, but in the West, I'm sure that there are some tribes within the Yoruba stock, you know, or even if a river divides state A from state B, does that mean that state B is no longer Yoruba? So if rivers have divided us, if the river Niger has divided us, yes, we can. Maybe if the river Niger was not there, our people are not nature, we'll be in the same state. So the river has divided us, Onitsha is in Anambra state, but we are the same stock. I am an Onitsha man, full-blooded. The reliance on oral literature, somebody talked about that whether it is authentic. Well, civilizations have gone with oral literature. Even in the Bible, you hear that this one begat that, begat that, begat that, begat that. It's oral literature. But these theories, these paradigms, don't always rely on oral literature. They are archaeological testings. They find artifacts and they test them. And with those results, they make extrapolations, which they combine with the oral literature to come out with a thesis. Now, the Igala connection. Somebody talked about Igala, whether the language came from Igala vis-a-vis the Aborigines. Now, there is a theory that Igbo language, actually, there's a theory that Igbo language was first spoken around the confluence of the two rivers, Benue and Niger. So that gives credence to the originality of Igala. You see? But then, have you asked yourself, the entire Igala nation in Kogi State, or maybe Kwara, Ikogi and Kwara, if you put them together, are they all to Enugu State? I'm asking. So if Igbos came from Igala, why are we more than Igalas? Were their parents wearing condoms so that they were not procreating? The only answer is that they came here and found people here, and we all mixed. If they brought the language, well, thank them very much for bringing the language. But what I know today is that the language is not spoken there, it is spoken here. So if they brought the language, we have adopted the language. After all, the Fulanis came and left Fufude and adopted Hausa language. Today, they have dominated the Hausas, even with the language. So if the Igalas brought the language here and met us here, we have adopted the language. Now, that language now defines us as Igbos. That does not in any way make the man from Igala more Igbo. But like I said, there are accounts that said they met people speaking the language here, which to me is more authentic, because why is it that the language is no longer spoken there? So the next one is Ibuameze and Ibuameze, and how that I did not explain how it applies. I said that what Ibuameze and Ibuameze means. If you read this book, The Dual Mandate by Lord Lugard, it's a very big book, about 620 pages, 602 pages. But in that book, he described Igbos that we have no respect for authority. That is absolutely balderdash. Igbos respect authority. We have our age group system. The young men will listen and they know where they belong. That is our system. What Lugard misinterpreted is this Ibuameze thing. And I said that though it relates to the old Athenian structures where Igbos didn't have kings, but that the metaphoric meaning, the real meaning is that Igbos don't worship authorities. That's what it means. We recognize kings, but we don't worship them. I think I said that. So, and today, in relation to Nigeria, that is why the other ethnic groups are afraid of the Igbos, because they know you cannot push Igbos around. Even Ahmadu Bello said that in 1954, when he was responding to a system, and he said that Igbos are very domineering people. that when you put them in a life camp, in a labor camp, they want to be rulers and all that. That was wrong. What is wrong is that, what is the correct thing is that Igbos don't worship authorities. They respect authority, they recognize them, but they recognize them, they give them legitimacy based on the law of the land. You cannot, because you're an authority, push an Igbo man around or try to subdue him or try to dominate him. That is the difference. That is the meaning of Igbo amazing. Not that Igbos don't have kings. We have kings. Don't we have kings in Igbo land? We have kings. We didn't have kings in the beginning, but over time, because of influence of culture, like I talk about culturation, in my place, we now have kings. But originally, we didn't have kings. Today, what it means is that we don't worship authorities. Then unifying the language, there is a point there. Yes, like I said, the Igbos don't want to feel that you want to dominate them. So the standardization committee should indeed carry everybody along. And there is this Catholic-Anglican conflict that is there. The Anambra people will know what I'm talking about because it's very serious in Anambra State. So let you not use the Igbo, which has been identified with the Anglican Church. I'm an Anglican myself, so that will suit me. But you see, it is not equitable for all Igbos. Knowing the kind of person the Igbo person is, he will not accept it. So the committee has to go back to work and get everybody, come up with an Igbo Lexis that we can learn in school. You know, after all, English people have a lot of dialects, but there's Queen's English, which they all learn in school. Then, yes. Then the young man there talked about the issue of discrimination, even among you people here. And I said, yes, that is the subterranean objective of this Igbo thing. You know, those who want to write Igbo, history of Igbos, want to say who is the real Igbo person. So when you write your history and you identify with the Nri paradigm, anybody who does not trace to Nri is inferior to you. If you do with the Oka paradigm, anybody who does not is inferior to you, and so on, and so forth, and so on. So, what I am saying categorically is that anybody whose native language is Igbo and nothing else is as Igbo as any other person who is Igbo. There is nothing like Igbo wu Igbo. There is nothing like call Igbo. You can have Igbo heartland because the majority of Igbos are in the east. But that does not make the man in the east more Igbo than the man in Rivers or the man in Delta State. And I said, the fact that we wear Bini beads does not make us less Igbo. And I gave examples of people who have adopted other cultures, including you who are wearing an English suit. So that does not make you less Igbo because you wear an English suit. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think he deserves another round of applause. If not for anything, for braving to tackle this question. And I hope that this will trigger more conversations around this issue as we need to form a more united whole. So on that note, I'd like to, on behalf of Enugu Sports Club, very gracious host, and Center for Memories, and also Urban Radio, that continues to provide us with a lot of support in this. Thank everyone who came out this night. And to say that, you know, do not weigh the importance of what we are attempting to do here by the number of people you see in the room. In fact, when Jesus started, he started with 12. And we're way more than 12 here. But we think that this conversation is very important. And we will continue to hold this conversation. So the first Friday of January, in Odokwana village, in our watch out for the text message. Because we will be here. First Friday of January. In a few days, we will announce who the speaker would be, and we hope to see you then. And on that note, thank you so much for coming, and we hope to see you again later. Thanks a lot.